Okay. Thanks, Dan. Thank you for that great introduction. I only had to pay him like 20 bucks extra for him to give me some nice words like that. So it's nice to see everybody today. It's a big honor to be here talking in front of everyone. As Dan said, my name is Jack Freed. I am a clinical engineer and research engineer here at the University of Pittsburgh, both part of our Department of Rehabilitation Technology as well as our Center for Assistive Technology. And today I'm going to be presenting to you guys wheelchair failures, repairs, and maintenance. What is best practice? This is not work that has been done all by myself. As you can see, we have many names up here, so I do want to give a quick shout out to Schein, Betz, Gede, Pramana, Weesie Walker, Mark Sullivan, and Mark Schmeler. This kind of collaboration between University of Pittsburgh and NARTS really came together and was a fruitful start to what we hope is the start of policy change in this field. So without further ado, we'll start talking about it. So quickly, here is the funding information for this project. And at this point, I do say I do not have any sort of conflict of interest to disclose. Okay, so a quick agenda as we're getting started to talk about this. So first I'm going to be talking about the background, kind of the current environment that has led us to start talking about a lot of this. We'll go into a little bit more of that, which is the data analysis that Pitt did to further back some of these claims that, and determine these repairs and trends in failure that we're seeing in these different wheelchair components. We're going to be talking about why we've determined that practice guidelines for repair and maintenance are important. And then we'll be going into what our actual document we've come up with states. So we'll be talking about our methods for best practice, our preventive maintenance guidelines, consumer responsibilities, provider responsibilities, and then from there we'll be talking about next steps. And we'll be having a slightly longer, hopefully, question period so that we can get your comments and get your feedback and have a bit of an open discussion on this. Because ultimately, this is a document that has only just begun. We really hope to get the rest of the industry behind us and collaborate with us on this as we develop this and better and refine it. So with that, let's get started. So the learning objectives for this is identifying 4 trends in wheelchair component failure and repair found on the Wheelchair Repair Registry data analysis. This is the data that we conducted and analyzed for this project. List 3 ways that the practice guideline document can aid the process of repairs and maintenance, and then actually applying these to 4 different stakeholder perspectives. So considering how manufacturers, how suppliers, how users themselves, and the payers as well can aid in making these type of things more common and well supported in the field. So a little bit about the current environment of failures and repairs and maintenance in the wheelchair sector. So failures are frequent. As you can see, the reported amount of failures experienced by users has only gone up as more and more studies have reported on it. 26% in 2005, all the way trending up to 88% now, last reported in 2020. A few things to specifically look at, especially in the 2016 study that I want to highlight regarding wheelchair actual repair and maintenance. So of those failures experienced, the 64% of failures experienced in this study, 27.6% of them experienced at least one adverse consequence. So this is things like injury, but also things like the inability to go to work, the inability to go to school. You can see 18.2% stranded. When users have these devices that break down for long periods of time, this is time that they must potentially stay in bed, develop pressure sores, develop other injuries, and they're not able to do the things that they need to do on a daily basis, whatever that may be. And then we're also seeing that right under 7% of the repairs and failures, I should say, documented in this study were unresolved, meaning that they were never repaired. 7% is a pretty high number for that. And then if you look at the self-completion for repairs, 40% of manual wheelchair users who experienced a failure fixed these repairs themselves. That's 14% for power wheelchair users as well. And I'll be referencing that statistic a few more times throughout the presentation to kind of talk about that. So, and a big thing we're seeing, and we'll talk about this more as well, is an inadequate level of data that's actually being shared amongst the industry, amongst suppliers, amongst manufacturers. And that's made it really, really hard to determine, what some of these policies should really be. And then, all of these type of things that we're seeing in the community from this failure data is leading to more tangible things we're seeing, like growing dissatisfaction among consumers regarding repairs and maintenance. We're seeing this in consumer surveys that I know are being presented at another time in a different session here at ISS. And then we're also seeing this across the country with introductions of right to repair legislation in Colorado and now in many other states across the world, across the country, sorry. And this right to repair legislation is important. Users should be able to have access to these guidelines and these tools and the parts and everything they need to be able to repair the chairs themselves, but it does not address the entire issue. When I said that stat, 40% of manual users and 14% of power users repair their chairs themselves. For some users, these are really, really helpful legislations that's going to allow them to live a little bit more independently. But for many, many other users, this is not adequate enough to really give them the care and the treatment that they need to continue to use their products effectively. And then there's also a recent OIG report regarding power mobility device repairs, showing that 261 of the 922 PMD repairs were out of compliance, meaning that they were either falsely documented or not documented thoroughly enough. A lot of this came from lack of documentation. So not recording things like the actual time it took to repair it, other things related to what type of product it was. These type of things are missing, and that leads to just holes in what you can actually, how much they actually end up charging for these repairs. And it's led to $8 million of the $40 million paid from Medicare to the industry being improperly paid. And all of this has continued to provide us inadequate reimbursement levels to make these repairs more effectively for our consumers. So Pitt really wanted to try and get a better sense of what the trends are in different components for wheelchair failure, and really break down and understand where we are in it as an industry. And so we were able to break down several components: motors, batteries, and wheelchair casters. Those were the components we had the most data of and we were able to analyze. And we did this using Labor Tracker. So we took field data from technicians in the community who recorded their repair instances with their consumers and built that into what we've called the Wheelchair Repair Registry. It's over 60,000 repairs recorded across 5,000 different devices, 25 manufacturers. And the breakdown is 60% manual wheelchairs, 35% power wheelchairs, and 5% scooters. And so we use this to kind of build our basis to start doing this analysis. And so first, looking at the wheelchair battery lifespan, we can see over 1,000 power wheelchairs were present in this. Right under 40% of all of these needed to actually have their battery replaced, fully replaced. And that median battery lifespan is 22 months, right under 2 years there. So after delivery. And then we found from comparing them that the manufacturer and the climate were the two highest associated with battery life variability. So as you can see, the biggest chunk here in this pie chart here is that the batteries were not holding charge. 88% of these batteries were unable to hold charge effectively and needed replacement. And again, this is right under 2 years that they needed to be replaced. And then we can actually, I should specify that the manufacturers here are the wheelchair manufacturers, not the actual battery manufacturers themselves. You can see that the survivor probability of these batteries quickly depletes across 1 to 2 to 3 years, to the point where at the 3rd year, you can see especially manufacturers C and D have very low survivability, and really at this point, the amount that have to be replaced does not align with how long you're expected to be able to have your chair for any period of time, and just does not make it effective for long-term use. And so we did a similar breakdown with motors as well. Again, over 1,200 devices, 307 group 2, 961 group 3. I will say that in both the battery and the motor analysis, we found that there were no significant differences in battery life or motor life between the two groups. So we have treated all of these as one pool. Again, the average device age is a little under maybe 2.5 years. 9% of them had at least one motor replacement, and the median motor lifespan is 38.8 months. And then again, as I said, there was no significant difference in those lifespans. And then you can see the breakdown of the reasoning is much more varied than the battery life. We have gearbox leaks of oil grease, we have drawing excessive amps, overheating, smoking, worn out parts. All these things need to be addressed to ensure that they work properly, or addressed so that they can be replaced. And then we can see here again also the expected life of these components does not drop as rapidly as the batteries we find, but still many of these motors being used right now in the industry hover around 50 to 60% survivability by year 3. And if we track this out further, we would find that this would continue to deplete. And then the next thing we looked at is casters. So looking at power wheelchair casters, we need to break this down, and so I want to explain a little bit about what these pie charts are showing. So the red and the purple cutouts for these are high-risk failures. So when we look at casters, a high-risk failure is something that causes immediate danger to the user themselves. So for instance, wheel fracture and bent casters are something that, if this occurs in an environment, this causes either immediate harm to the user, maybe they tip out and cause injury, whatever it may be, or also this completely leaves the wheelchair to be unusable, and you need immediate replacement to be able to use this. And these are the type of failures, along with batteries failing and motors failing, that really leave users without any other option except to be repaired and replaced components. And so the other ones are low-risk failures, so bearing fractures, worn-out tires. These are failures that do not cause immediate harm to the user, and are actually there to, in some ways, for instance, like bearing fractures, a bearing fracturing before the caster is to be expected and a much better outcome than the caster failing all at once. When bearing fractures occur, they can easily be replaced and continue to do their function, which is to distribute the load off of those casters. And the same thing with worn out tires. These can still cause the casters to continue to function, but really they will need immediate replacement, because what occurs is if you do not replace these in a timely fashion, the high-risk failures are right around the corner. These casters will soon experience things like wheel fracture and bent casters that will cause harm. But if you can be proactive about it, and this is where we kind of start to talk a little bit more about preventative maintenance, you can continue to provide support and function to these casters and catch issues before they happen. And that's really the biggest goal we're trying to establish here with this best practice. So if you look at these group 3, so this is all from the same manufacturer, but you're increasing the group level. And as you can see, each group that you increase up, you have a higher amount of high-risk failures. So 10% with your group 2, up to 24% with your group 3s, and all the way up to 36% for group 4. And this is a trend we'll see when we look at manual wheelchairs too, in that the higher you go up in complexity for these chairs, and the higher you go up into the complexity and the needs of the user, the more likely they are actually to experience a high-risk failure. So we really need to take a look at all the different groups, all the different types of wheelchairs, and address those issues. And so we can also look at a comparison between all group 3s from 4 different manufacturers. You can see these are all very significantly similar to each other, with the same pretty even distribution of high risk, low risk, and failures on this. And so we can also take a look at the survivability of these power wheelchairs. So we were able to look at the survivability for group 3 from 2 manufacturers. And as you can see, I'm going to try out this pointer here. So right at the 50% mark, you can see that the casters that we did have reported, all of them failed with the 50% surviving amount of casters was right around a year and a quarter. And then we can see that no casters from either of these manufacturers were able to survive from up until 2.5 years. So when we look at manual as well, we can see that comparing tilt and space wheelchairs to ultralight wheelchairs, we can see that tilt and space actually have over double the amount of high-risk failures from the data we gathered than tilt and space do. Again, this is following a theme that users who need complex rehabilitation needs for their wheelchairs are now more likely to experience a high-risk failure. And then one thing we were able to do from this data is actually look at the effect of service repairs. So repairs that were done on the caster, not because the caster failed, but because they needed to be replaced, or maybe during a other repair that, something on the wheelchair the caster was replaced. And as we can see, the percentage of service repairs, as that increases, you're actually getting a lower amount of high-risk caster failures in your population. And so this is one sign that we could say, the more you're able to prevent these failures and catch them before they happen, you're able to get, lower risk failures and healthier outcomes for the consumers. And so this all leads into why practice guidelines. And so for this, all of these failures, as we continue to do this, we have a very reactive process right now, where the caster or the component, the battery, whatever it might be, that fails, and then we react to it from there. And this is really what causes a long point of downtime. And then also, in terms of documentation, there's just not too much consistency in this. One of the things we found from this data, we really wanted to do downtime, so how long the casters were actually, or the components were actually down until they were replaced, to really get a sense of how long these repairs were taking. But we really just did not have enough data submitted through Labor Tracker to really understand this. We were missing purchase dates, we were missing date when the repair was the failure was reported, date when the repair was actually made. This type of data is really, really crucial to understanding how long these components are actually lasting, because really you could attempt to try and make components that last longer, but really at the end of the day, all these components will fail. That is an inevitability. The one thing you can do to subside this is put into place practices that allow these components to last longer. So replacing components, 6-month checkups, yearly checkups, where you actually can come in and actually be serviced and have your components replaced so that your wheelchair can continue to function long before, long after they're supposed to fail. And so we really wanted to take a look at this and take what we found from this data and address some of these issues we found while we were analyzing it. And so this is why we've decided to put these best practices together for repair and maintenance. Because we as an industry really need to come together and start this as the beginning of a pathway to policy change. It's a very, very complex road, but it takes each member of the community, so suppliers, manufacturers, payers, practitioners in any way, and the users themselves to really get involved in this to make these changes necessary. And it's going to take a lot more data in this field, communication between the practitioners themselves, and collaboration between all the different factors in the industry. So again, this is just really showing that all of us have to come together to really show best practice and demonstrate what that looks like in this community. Because this is the first step, putting this together and actually detailing what we should be doing as an industry is the first step to actually start talking about policy changes, better reimbursement policies, all these different things. And so I'm just going to, this is basically the beginning of our document, and I just want to have this up here to kind of talk about, a little bit more about why we want to do this. So NART's policy for wheelchair service, it provides a guideline for registrants to achieve consumer safeguards and high quality service. It's also intended to be able to facilitate consumer well-being. That's really at the top of it. We're doing this because consumers need functioning products that they can rely on and services that they can rely on and go to be able to prevent this as much as possible. And so these practice guidelines really address 3 primary areas: efficiency, documentation, and prevention and replacement. So for the efficiency, we really want to be able to support timeliness of the service to kind of decrease any of the burdens, not just associated with us as suppliers, but also as from the users themselves, to make sure that there's as little downtime as possible and that we are able to service and tend to as many products as we can and consumers as we can. The documentation, really creating standardized procedures for documentation and content to ensure every single piece of data is gathered so we can better understand how these components operate. And then the actual prevention and the replacement. So identifying critical warning signs of component failure and establishing, again, a system that is more proactive than it is reactive to these situations. And so let's talk about some of the methods we have outlined for the best practice. So first, the intake process. I mean, this is, again, we're really going to be talking about documentation a lot, but this is really probably the most important component of this best practice, because it all really starts with this. This isn't just, this is essential to understanding the needs for the repair. So what has broken, what type of chair is it, what is the model number? All these things seem, small, and maybe you guys are documenting this, but really, from the data we gathered, the amount that was missing that would have allowed us to be able to better understand these type of components was really missing. And so we really need to understand what we need to be documenting every step of the way along this process. And then this is, again, really useful for us to better understand time to failure and time to repair. So the more manufacturers are able to understand, how their components operate in the field, the better we're able to actually set guidelines for when you should be doing, routine maintenance on your wheelchair in a service clinic. So this is also very, very important for understanding that. And then again, can be used to hone these guidelines more and more as we go on. So the service environment, so this is really important because the service environment should always be conducive to the type of service being provided. And because of that, we think the baseline is a service facility is the best place to be able to do this work whenever possible. Because this reduces the amount of time it takes for the actual technician or supplier, whoever it is, to travel and actually perform this repair, and gives them more time to be documenting it properly, seeing more clients, and actually being able to move this process along faster. But we do understand that, clients, won't always be able to come to a physical location like that. So in that case, I'll talk about telehealth in a little bit, but also one thing that we've talked about is that, a mobile repair van is also a really good solution for this, to be able to give you all the excess parts and tools that you would need to do any repair you would usually do, but be able to actually bring it to the client. So when that is actually deemed necessary, then you would be able to use the repair van and actually go and service the client. But otherwise than that, we find it best that the client actually comes to the service facility, is seen as in person, so that there's plenty of room, it's safe for the technician, and they're able to use all the different tools they have at their service. And then I had mentioned telehealth, and so we'll talk about that a little here as well. So, the last couple of years, for better or for worse, we were really, we went from, exploring telehealth to really being quite dependent on it. And I think moving forward, telehealth is still a really, really great strategy for us to be able to start the process of working with clients. So, this service request would come from the client. They say to you, my caster broke, or my battery's dead, or my brakes don't work, whatever it is. And you could leverage these remote health technologies to either monitor, assess, resolve, or schedule someone in person. So this is kind of like your first initial meeting. You can hop on a call with them, be able to talk with them if possible. And you can either, if they are someone with a lot of experience with their wheelchair and they're able to do these repairs, that's a great setting where you can actually help them along that process and do that with them. But if not, it's a great opportunity to assess the issue, try and resolve it if you can, but if not, it's a great jumping off point to actually scheduling an in-person service. And this whole time, another thing about this is you should be monitoring along that way to actually see, like, am I noticing anything else that might not be working properly? Has it been a long time before their bearings have been replaced? Should I do that now? Different things like that to really get a sense of what your client needs. And then the actual service encounter, I talked about this a little bit, but I'll talk about it a little bit more here. It's about not just repairing and fixing the immediate issue, but it's also about prevention when you can. So when they do come to you with an issue, that is the primary issue. You want to address that as soon as you can and resolve that issue. But really, you're also looking to prevent any further issues that they might encounter and kind of check the boxes on whatever maintenance they haven't received. So if it's been a long period of time, again, that they haven't had certain components checked out, that is your time to really do it. And also, if it is possible, if this is going to be a repair that might take time, maybe parts need to be ordered, whatever it is, the ability to give them a temporary chair in the meantime is a solution that is not permanent, but is something that could at least give them their mobility back in the meantime while they're waiting for their chair to be serviced. Because again, this entire time this is going on, users are unable to go to work, go to school, do whatever they need to do. So being able to give them a temporary chair that they can use in the meantime is one solution you can use to address that. And then again, hitting on documentation here. So this entire time you really want to be documenting as much as possible. So when you first met with them, when you scheduled the initial visit, when that visit actually occurred, again, the model number, the part number, all these different things you need to understand the client and their current needs, and possibly even their future needs. Here is really important to understand the time spent on the repair. This needs to be well documented moving forward so we can get a better sense of how much time that is taking us as an industry. And then it's also very important to note any of those additional services you did provide. So if you saw that the bearing was cracked and it needs to be replaced, even though you came to fix brakes, it's important to still document that that is something you did, so that you know for future reference that this has been done for them. And then quality assurance. So again, making sure that you've collected data at each step of the process, but then also providing summaries of the failure, the repair, the whole entire process, so that you can understand areas of improvement and use them to make this process better. Again, this is really something that we need to practice more to understand more. And so the more that we're actually gathering this data and implementing these practices, the better sense we'll have of how to make these practices better and come to a larger agreement on what this really looks like. And then it's really, really important that this data is shared. So this is shared to fellow employees, to referral sources, to the payers, to the manufacturers, really everyone involved in the entire process so that they know and they can use this to better their own practices as well. And so then we'll go into some of the preventative maintenance guidelines. And so this really starts at the very beginning, during the fitting and the delivery of the device. Suppliers should really go over with their clients the company policies, a written checklist of what they should be looking for to actually maintain and keep going, as well as warranty information provided by the manufacturers. And so you also want to take this as an opportunity to set maintenance appointment schedules using either the manufacturer's recommendations. Right now, a lot of them are recommending when you should be checking these components, but really we really want to understand when we should almost expect these components to break down so that we can understand when to get ahead of it and replace it before that ever actually occurs. And then also the use case of the consumer. So if they're very active, if they put a lot of wear into their chair, that needs to be accounted for in this process because maybe there's someone that needs to be checked on and serviced a little bit more often than a normal baseline case. And then these preventive maintenance guidelines really especially consider mechanical components like casters, brakes, armrests, backs, anything that deals with the mechanical components of the chair, the electrical components, so your joysticks, your interfaces, any of your wiring in your chair, and then a special attention to specifically the drive motors and the seat actuators because they are so vital to the actual function of the user in the wheelchair. And then this really leads to us talking about an individualized service plan. So, when you're doing your assessment and you're outfitting someone for their chair, you really want to get a sense of their activity level, their environment, and their ability to complete repairs. All three of these things really come to play together to determine what you need to do moving forward to keep their chair in the best condition possible. So if there's someone who's very, very active, they might require more repairs than necessary. If their environment is one that might dictate it. So, we know that, bearings and casters and other components on the chairs are very, very susceptible to things like high humidity, dirt, debris. If they live in these environments that really dictate that, that'll be another situation that really requires more attention and more consistent repairs to be done on the chair. And then we go into both the consumer and the provider maintenance responsibilities here. So the consumer themselves cannot be fully relied on to complete these or expected to complete these repairs themselves. Again, as I was talking, the ability to make these repairs themselves, for some might be fantastic and all they really need, but we can't expect that to be the norm for everyone. And so we really need to understand that we need to work with them up front to determine how much we should be reliable and how much we can expect them to be able to fix for themselves. And that doesn't mean we just, even if they're a very reliant user and can make a lot of the repairs themselves, we still have things in place that monitor them and ensure that their chair is always working properly. So at the time of delivery, the consumer should be instructed on how to properly perform inspections as detailed in either the supplier's written instruction checklist or the manufacturer's owner's manual. So these instructions should be tailored, again, to that consumer's level of experience and ability. When the experience and ability exists, the consumer can then be instructed on how to properly do these repairs, but they should always be trained on how to do so. And then the frequency of these inspections, repairs, and its reasoning should always be clearly explained to them. Because again, this is something that does take a lot of self-advocacy from the user, and they need to understand why these things are in place to be able to check their wheelchair ahead of time instead of only reacting to it when it fails. And then we look at the provider maintenance responsibilities. So you really want to tailor these baseline recommendations, again, to the user's experience, ability, environment, and usage. All those four components are really going to play a big role in what you should expect from the user's chair moving forward. So establishing a recommended inspection and service guideline, all these things, again, we know that every group is going to be different, right? Every company is going to have different policies for this, and that's fine and that's great, but we want to make sure that there is, established inspection and service guidelines that they can refer to that are based on backed data that we've seen in the community that's also backed by the manufacturer who is, selling these components on their chairs. So it's also very crucial that all this information is provided in written form so that they have it and, also the ability to get it digitally as well. And then we really want to start just training all technicians and practitioners on the procedures for instructing these inexperienced consumers on how to thoroughly inspect their wheelchairs for potential problems. I mean, these are wheelchair skills, right? The ability to effectively actually repair these wheelchairs are something that can be properly taught and should be when the user is able to. And so this is what we've really come up with as a baseline. This is something that we do, though, want everyone's input on this as we're moving forward. And so we will be releasing this document at the end of this, essentially. And we do have a QR code and a link to a Qualtrics survey where we ask you to please review this document and provide us input. So either from just if you want to actually provide your name and your email and actually collaborate with us, you're more than welcome to. You're also able to without listing any of that details, just blindly give us your feedback on your thoughts on this. So we're opening this up for open comment period. We'll be following up with updates in mid-May at a NARTS webinar we'll be doing. And then we hope to close this and make another final draft of this by July 1. So that is our plan for this. We're really, really excited. This is super vital. This is something that the industry really needs to start getting ahead of because these type of guidelines are coming to us either way. And so I think it's really important for the industry to come together, form what this looks like, and put this in place so that we can start talking about policy changes so that this is something that's covered and well practiced, and we can provide components that really and services that really provide the most longevity and reliability to consumers for their products. So thank you very much. Any questions? We have 2 microphones up in the front. I know a bunch of the people from our group are here to kind of answer any questions you have. And so please feel free to share any comments or questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You did a really good job of talking about how it really does depends on the patient's usage.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that in the data. Are you are there any type of numbers or statistics and obviously power chairs could be a lot easier because you're gonna be able to record the miles, but like car manufacturers, it's like 1 year or 30,000, it's just depends on how you use it. So A, do you have any data on that? And B, if you're working with a new patient and they say, well, how do I charge this thing? A lot of people, I feel just go to I just plug in my laptop and when I need it once a quarter I go to, or whatever. It's well, that's not really how you do these chairs. So just a brand new user, doesn't know anything about a power chair. How would you instruct them they're an everyday user. How would you instruct them on how to properly charge their equipment? Because I feel like that's the biggest thing that comes back to me as a clinician on, oh, hey, my chair's dead. It's okay, well, the first thing I ask is, how have you been charging it? Oh, I forgot what you said, so I just do whatever I want. It's what's the best guideline for that as well?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I can address the first part of your question first. So yeah, there really isn't too much. This data was not, the data we got from Labor Tracker is not indicative of the actual user themselves. It's not indicative also of the actual things like mileage and things like that. When we determined time to failure, we really used purchase dates that we had and failure dates that we had, and the stuff that was well documented is what we used to actually derive some of that data. So that is, again, when I say this field really needs data, I mean, that's a huge part of it because we are missing a lot of those factors. So we don't necessarily have data on that, but we want to start gathering that. And the more that this is reported, again, the documentation, the more that this is reported consistently and thoroughly, the more information we'll have to actually determine how long these products and components are actually lasting. And the more we can actually start coming up with really refined policies so that, when this does come and we really want to start pushing change, we can really say, we know exactly, how to handle this type of stuff. In terms of, actually instructing users, again, this really will depend, but I think it's really important to not just show them how to use it, but to have them use it for you, So you're not just training them and showing, here's this is how you do it, okay, sweet, I'm getting out of here. You really want to take the time, show them as many times as they need to, really thoroughly explain it, and then, see them using it and see them using it properly, I think is a very good way to do it as well. So.